Crystal Palace manager Oliver Glasner has spoken out for, I think, the first time, maybe the second time, around the club's inability to support the team, to support him in the transfer window in the summer over the last 24 hours. And it comes amidst a wave of news reports linking the man to the next vacant Liverpool job should Arne Slot be relieved of his duties over the coming weeks. We've got some articles to go through to talk about that, talk about the likelihood of Oliver Glasner going there. Obviously, he has 6 months left on his contract at Crystal Palace. Steve Parish and Glasner yet to put pen to paper. It seems like the article is really, or the intention of Glasner with his comments is really to try to trigger Parish into some activity in the January window to try to give them, give the club as good a chance at finishing the season strongly in the league and in Europe as possible. But of course, with that sort of outspoken narrative, it does beg the question, what would happen in a world where there was a vacancy at Liverpool before the January window begins? Will Liverpool turn to Oliver Glasner? Would he play the sort of football and the sort of shape of football, the sort of formation that would suit Liverpool right now with their squad being relatively thin, in fact, very thin, needing support in their defensive formation, in their defensive options, with Glasner playing a back three? What about Xabi Alonso? He is also under pressure. And there's other articles that are suggesting that should the axe fall on Arne Slot in the coming weeks, then given all of the problems that Xabi Alonso is having, trying to create a happy and connected dressing room at Real Madrid, that maybe, just maybe, Arne Slot would be replaced by Xabi Alonso in that scenario instead. And if so, then what would that mean for Oliver Glasner? Would he potentially become a target at Manchester United? Should he become available if Amorim's form continues to be volatile? He would surely fit and suit a succession to Ruben Amorim, having spent the last 2 years at Manchester United building a team that plays a very similar style or formation, at least in football. What about at Tottenham Hotspur? If there was to be the axe falling on Thomas Frank, would Oliver Glasner take up that mantle? We're going to talk about it all right now, guys. Please do smash the like button on the video if you enjoy this content. Hit the subscribe as well and hit the notification bell. And drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topics. Let's start with the quotes, shall we, guys? Let's start with the quotes from Oliver Glasner. Let me change a bit of background, make it a little bit nicer for you to have to. I'm not sure if it's nicer or not, but either way, we're going to go blue for today. He said, this is from Yahoo Sport, let's say the club was not proactive in the transfer window and failed to sign players who could make an immediate impact and universally improve the quality of the squad. When Palace struggled to take chances, Glasner is unable to inject new life into his front line. Meanwhile, when the former Eintracht Frankfurt coach wants to rotate, he has very few reliable alternatives. He has made only 11 changes to his Premier League starting 11 this season. Seems like at Tottenham, as a Tottenham fan, we seem to make about 11 changes every single week. The fewest of any boss in the top flight, highlighting the limited competition for places. This is what he said. We want to compete in every game, and the club must get the resources to get this done, Glasner said after Sunday's defeat to Manchester United. This is the progress. If we don't want progress, we will stop playing. We will definitely have a good season. If we had done a few things better in the summer, it would have been even better. In January, we need to correct what we missed in the summer. We would have played 34 games by January the 10th. That's about 60 to 65% of the season. I've never talked about the depth, but it feels like it's time because I want to protect the players. We missed the chance to strengthen the squad in the summer. We knew the schedule. We knew Ismail would go to AFCON. Nothing was surprising. When you play European football for the first time in your history, let's invest instead of save. We saved, and this is what we're facing. We all wished for a little more backing. I think Crystal Palace spent about £50 million on transfers and obviously received over 60 for Eze's departure. So I'm not sure there was even a net spend that was in the minus numbers. Let's go into the, let's carry on. He carries on to say, this is from Steve Parish. He said, I admire Oliver so much. This was after he won the Community Shield. He just wants to win trophies. I don't mind that. Someone at the football club should do. I have other things to worry about. The financial jeopardy. I have to look at everything, but I don't think for a minute that I want to do anything other than support them. We are trying to find the line topics, Glasner said, before November's win at Wolves. Whether it's possible, whether the club wants to do it, and whether Oliver Glasner wants to do it. The most important thing is whether something is a wish or a goal. The difference is that you have to work and invest for a goal. Everybody wants to win the Premier League, but is it realistic? We have to look at what we have to do to take the next step. It's important for Crystal Palace to grow as an organisation, such as regularly wanting to play European football. What's interesting here is that the quote from Parish is saying, I don't mind that someone wants to win trophies. Someone else at the football club, someone at the football club should do. I've got other things to worry about, the financial jeopardy. And to be entirely honest, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't that what John Textor said about Steve Parish when he went on TalkSport and talked about his departure from the club when he sold his 40% stake in Crystal Palace for £190 million? I'm pretty sure in thinking that Steve Parish, despite having all of the control, I think he only owns about 10% of the club. I'm pretty sure one of the other American partners, who is not the guy, Woody Johnson, who took over the 40%, but another guy who's involved with Blackstone, or BlackRock or Blackstone Capital. I think he's the CEO of the investment group, the hedge fund. Anyway, so for all of the power, I'm pretty sure he only owns 10% or something around that. I could be wrong. Don't quote me, of the club. And obviously, John Textor said that he wanted to win trophies, but that Steve Parish was more concerned with relegation. And he's kind of admitting it there after the Community Shield. I think there's a couple of other quotes just quickly to bring to your attention from a different article here, which I will also bring to your attention before we talk about what will happen there at Liverpool as well. And it says, we missed out a couple of chances. This is also Oliver Glasner believes a lack of serious investment involved in the squad, having sold talisman Eberechi Arsenal, is coming back to bite them. He said, we missed a couple of chances in July and August in the transfer window to make it easier for us. But again, we will stick together and make it better, Glasner told Match of the Day. If you play, and I think this is the bit we've already done. If you play European football for the first time in your history, you should invest and not save. I think January is too late to add. We will have played more than 50% of our games. Everything was pretty clear, and I didn't say anything. But today I think it is also time to speak about that we missed the chance to play an even better season in the summer. This was speaking on TNT as well. He said, we are still in very good positions, but the chance to play even better season we threw away in the summer. Now, obviously, Oliver Glasner only has 6 months left on his contract, as I said in the opening thing. He hasn't yet signed the new contract. I'm sure Steve Parish wants to tie him down, but it doesn't sound like they're on the same page, and it maybe is not quite as vocal or obvious, but it doesn't sound too different to what when Nuno sort of called out the owner a little bit, Marinakis at Nottingham Forest. That always was going to end in trouble. I don't think Glasner will get fired. But I do think that it might be easier to be able to convince him to leave if a club was to become available that had a better option with regards to squad options and squad depth, but also owners that were willing to put their hand in their pocket. And look, there's obviously a few options out there that would be considered a step up traditionally, no disrespect to Crystal Palace fans, but in the size of the football clubs, in the backing, the financial resources, that are all potentially looking at different options, whether at this stage in the season or otherwise. And that's obviously Manchester United, it's obviously Liverpool, and it will be Tottenham Hotspur. Now, look, Liverpool, I think it's 9 defeats in 13 games for Arne Slot. Does he have enough wins in the locker? He did win the Premier League for them in his first season. Doesn't seem quite as happy-go-lucky a guy. Everything seems quite stressed out and a little bit more snarky in his commentary. I think that they obviously didn't do enough in the summer with regards to defensive reinforcements and defensive-minded players. And then on top of that, you've got the obvious decline of Virgil van Dijk, and you have a guy in Konate who looks like a shell of the man that he was a couple of seasons ago or last season. And maybe his head is turned by the potential move with a free transfer. But I think Real Madrid came out this week and said that they're not interested in Konate. So maybe his performances has played himself out of a free transfer move away. Maybe he would be better off if he just signed the contract, got renewed at Liverpool, and then got back to playing good football. But it remains to be seen what will happen there with regards Konate. Keeping on the Glasner topic, I'm pretty sure Glasner did say something, or there was intentions back in the end of the summer that if Crystal Palace sold Mark Gahey, I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that Glasner basically said, if you sell Gahey to Liverpool, I'm gone. And obviously he didn't. He's still at Crystal Palace right now. But with Liverpool's desperate need for defensive reinforcements, Mark Gahey with 6 months left on his contract. Parish saying he'd rather lose him for free than let him go on the cheap. But is there a number that Parish can't afford to turn down in a scenario where he's true to his word, that he's worried about financial jeopardy, not so much trophies? So it'd be interesting to see what happens. Would potentially Mark Gahey go to Liverpool and then Oliver Glasner follow him swiftly afterwards in a world where Arne Slot was to lose a few more games between now and the end of the year? It's fascinating. But even in a world where he did, where Arne Slot was relieved of his duties, would he be first choice? And of course, the other story that I want to bring to your attention here is about Xabi Alonso. So this is from 442, and it basically reflects on the fact that Xabi Alonso, when he was at Leverkusen, he had a clause inserted into his contract that essentially said that he would be allowed to leave Leverkusen should any of his former clubs become available or come in for him. And they were, this is what came out from German publication Bild, that Liverpool, Real or Bayern Munich came in, then he could leave. This was in 2023. Now, apparently there's no such article no such clause exists in his current contract at Real Madrid, but Real Madrid might not particularly care about any of those things. They might be more than happy or willing to see Xabi Alonso leave the club. It looks like there's a civil war at Real Madrid. It says it so here. You know, it genuinely does feel like half of the team seem to be behind him and supporting him. Players like Arda Güler, players like Mbappe, they seem to be benefiting and thriving under Xabi Alonso. But a lot of the superstar names like Rodrigo, Valverde, Vinny Jr. and others are really unhappy with the style of football and really unhappy with their minutes relative to their expectations. I mean, look, they're still doing okay, of course, in La Liga, but they're doing relatively okay in the Champions League for this stages. But they have, you know, flattered to deceive a little bit, conceding 3 goals against Olympiacos just last week in the Champions League. Not a good performance. And so, if there was to be a change of manager at Real Madrid at the same time, if that was to happen, you know, relatively quickly, just because he can't seem to keep his squad happy, and the civil war and an unsettled dressing room. Look, as always, the manager is the guy that will fall if those things don't resolve itself. You can't sack 25 players. And Xabi Alonso maybe isn't, you know, the sort of the profile that is worth keeping relative to the names of the people that are unhappy. Real Madrid need to have Galacticos and major names. And if a lot of those names are unhappy and they would want to go, you know, which side would will Los Blancos choose in supporting? I would probably argue that it won't be Xabi Alonso. But we shall see. In a world where he was to be relieved of his duties, would Liverpool take the opportunity immediately, guys, to make that decision to chop Arne Slot, who obviously flattering to deceive himself, and move for Xabi Alonso instead of Oliver Glasner? I would imagine that Glasner would be second fiddle behind Liverpool, just because Glasner doesn't necessarily have the defensive options at Liverpool currently, and he plays a system with a back 3. It would be, you know, sort of square pegs for round hole problems until they could get into January and then rebuild that defense. But it remains to be seen. In a world, however, where Xabi Alonso was to go to Arne Slot or to Liverpool, or if Liverpool turned it around and they didn't end up chopping Arne Slot at all, then would Oliver Glasner leave Crystal Palace if this open book of distaste for what happened in the summer materializes into an equally weak January? Then will Oliver Glasner potentially have his head turned by a team like Tottenham Hotspur, whose owners, the new look owners, they are the same owners, but the new look owners have recently put £100 million into the transfer kitty with promises of more to come once the scouting department figure out exactly what it is that Tottenham need. Is Thomas Frank's days at Tottenham Hotspur numbered? As a Tottenham fan, I would say yes, they are. If he loses to Newcastle and then Brentford as well, I think there's every chance that Tottenham Hotspur might pull the plug, because it's very, very toxic. Tottenham Hotspur have only won 4 games at home in the last year, and we've already matched the record of the worst amount of losses in a home season in our history, in that number being 10. If we lose to Brentford next weekend, then that will be our worst ever year. Of course, that splits across Ange Postecoglou's year into Thomas Frank's year, but for sure the fans aren't happy. The players aren't happy with the fans. There's a hell of a lot of poison and toxicity, and maybe that's a reason why Oliver Glasner was saying, no, thank you, I wouldn't want to touch Tottenham with a barge pole right now. You know, every successive manager comes in and feels the immediate frustration and the impatience of fans that have really just seen a regression for 6 years from the Champions League final, and a failure of the club to really back and replace some of the stars that have come and gone since that time. It's not good times at Tottenham Hotspur, but if you pay enough money and you show enough support in terms of the financial ability to go out and attract the best players, or at least relatively the best players, then maybe Oliver Glasner would go to Tottenham. What about Manchester United? Of course, Ruben Amorim is he's volatile in his form. He's just on the back of a victory over Crystal Palace. And earlier on in the autumn, he did manage to put together 5 unbeaten, 3 wins on the bounce. But he still has the ability to lose games, and certainly doesn't cut the jib of a manager that looks fully confident and fully happy. And Manchester United fans as well are absolutely furious at times with the football that they see and the inability for the manager to kind of look like he has any kind of plan B up his sleeve. He also has created relatively 70% of the way there to building a squad that would absolutely seamlessly fit Oliver Glasner's model. And so I think that if Man United were to pull the trigger on Amorim, they would go all out to get Glasner, because his system would fit what they have already been building, and it would just be a continuation of the process, but hopefully with a better manager. It remains to be seen, though, how it will all figure itself out. But Oliver Glasner coming out and calling out Steve Parish and the Crystal Palace board for not backing enough. One of the most desirable managers in the Premier League. If you're a fan of Crystal Palace, United, Liverpool, or Tottenham, let me know your thoughts. Would you take Glasner if the opportunity became available? And will Crystal Palace do enough in January to convince him to stay and maybe sign a new contract? Let me know, guys. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you on the next one. And as always, bye-bye.